The last week of October and the Rideau River had already gone the color of old pewter. Hartwell Restorations occupied the ground floor of a converted mill on the edge of Merrickville, and on Friday evenings the smell of linseed oil and sawdust drifted as far as the parking lot. Soren Hartwell was finishing a mortise joint on a mid-century credenza when the front door opened and the sound of the fundraiser outside came in with the cold. He did not look up. He heard heels on the flagstone, then they stopped. A woman's voice, closer than he expected. "You work late." He set down the chisel. He said it before he thought to check himself. Not as late as whoever hired a restoration firm and never came to see the work. There was a pause. Then she said, quiet enough that he almost missed it, "I have been coming. Just not when you were watching. If that opening stayed with you, drop the words 'stay' in the comments before we go on." 6:30 the next morning. The river was misted over and the gravel of the parking lot was rimed at the edges. Soren walked the long way around the Heritage Foundation's welcome tables, still folded and stacked from the night before, and let himself into the mill with his own key. His apprentice, a 22-year-old named Bastian, was already there, standing at the coffee press with the careful posture of someone who had overheard something he was not supposed to. He poured a second mug and pushed it across the workbench, without being asked. Soren took it. Neither of them said anything about the woman who had stayed until the parking lot emptied. By 7 he was home. The kitchen of his rented half-duplex on Drummond Street smelled of toast and the cold that came under the back door off the yard. His daughter Margot sat at the table in her school clothes, drawing a house on the back of a grocery receipt. The house had 3 chimneys, which was wrong for the roofline she had sketched. "You came back late," she said. "Finished a joint on the credenza." "Just a joint?" He accepted that. She added a weather vane to the middle chimney and turned the pencil around. On the 14th floor of the Caldwell Group's Ottawa office tower, Tess Caldwell stood at the window with a coffee that had been cold for an hour. The river below was the color of slate. Her operations director, a composed man named Vincent, knocked once and entered with a tablet under his arm. He had the face of someone choosing words carefully. "Hargrove filed the Belmont motion this morning," he said. "Special board session in 3 weeks." She nodded. "Tess." He waited. She did not turn from the window. After a moment he set the tablet on the desk and left without asking the question he had come in with. She did not look at the tablet. She looked at the photograph on the sideboard. Her father at the helm of a canoe on the Gatineau, herself beside him at maybe 12, squinting against the August light. At noon she came down to the mill. No appointment. The workshop door was open and Soren was crouched beside the credenza fitting a drawer runner. She stopped 3 meters away. He felt her before he heard her. He stood. "Condition report on the Belmont pieces," she said. "I would like it by Wednesday." "You will have it Tuesday." She did not move. "Anything else, Miss Caldwell?" She looked at him. He looked at her. The mill around them, the hiss of the river, the low knock of the old water wheel restored to turning did not pause. "No," she said, "that is all." She turned. He let her get 4 steps. "I should not have said what I said last night." She did not stop walking. "You think I would have answered if you had not." She kept going. He stood with the drawer runner in his hand for a long moment after she was gone. Then he sat down on the work stool and looked at his hands and could not explain what he was feeling, only that it was not hurt, and that made it harder. At the end of the day he stood at the mill race and watched the current run. Bastian came up beside him with 2 cans of ginger ale and handed one over without asking. "You wanted to say it," Bastian said. "Not last night. There is no right night for that kind of thing." They stood without speaking until the river lights came on across the lock. The next morning Tess stayed in her office past the usual hour. She had a stack of briefing notes she did not read. She stood and walked to the sideboard and lifted the photograph down and laid it flat on the desk. The Belmont restoration. Her father had called it the most important commission he had ever approved. He had said so at the signing in 2013. She had been 23 and standing beside him, and she had asked who had done the preliminary drawings. He had said the young man is too careful to survive attention right now. Tess had smiled. Her father had not. Vincent came in with the morning agenda. He glanced at the photograph. He glanced at her. "Hartwell," he said, as though it had just occurred to him. The apprentice mentioned he came from the Heritage team in the Monsell subsidiary. She did not look up. How long ago? 11 years, give or take. He did not want to say more than that. She thanked him. She waited until he was gone. Then she put her palm flat on the photograph as though she was trying to keep something from coming up through it. By midday, she was at the mill. She walked past the main workshop without stopping and found Soren in the storage annex at the back, where the foundation kept pieces waiting on assessment. The roll door was open. He was crouched beside an 18th-century blanket chest, cleaning a hinge with a brass brush. She did not wait for him to stand. You designed the Belmont drawings. He set down the brush and rose slowly. I designed the Belmont drawings. The light came in from the open door in a long slant. Dust moved in it. Outside the river ran and a kingfisher cut across the window and was gone. My father approved you when you were 26. He did. He told me he could not credit you publicly because the attention would damage you. He told me the same thing about silence. She sat down on a packing crate as though her legs had settled the question for her. She did not cry. She held herself the way a person does when a wave comes up without warning, and they have not yet decided whether to brace. You were going to lead the Heritage Division. I was going to. He did not say her name. He said my wife was sick. We moved back here. She lived 14 months. After she was gone, I went into the studio and looked at my drawing table and knew that the next line I drew I would hate, so I did not draw it. Tess was quiet for a long time. Why did you come back here specifically? Because the Belmont chest is in this building. Because the river is where Margot started school. Because Bastien needed a senior hand, and I needed work, and there was nowhere else I was willing to be. She nodded. She stood. She did not touch him. She walked to the open doorway and stopped with her hand on the door jamb. You should have let him credit you. He understood why I asked him not to. I know he did, she said. He always did. She left. Soren stood in the slant of light and did not move for a long time. 2 floors up in his private office, Hargrove Aldous opened the bottom drawer of his credenza and removed a sealed document folder marked Caldwell Heritage Trust Instrument 2013. He looked at it. He placed it back. He picked up his phone. Move the session up, he said. 3 weeks is too long. Soren came home that night and Margot was at the kitchen table again. She had drawn the 3-chimney house again, but this time she had put a smaller house beside it with 1 chimney and a cat on the step. That is a reasonable roofline, he said. I know, she said. I looked it up at the library. He kissed the top of her head and sat down across from her. Dad, yes, tomorrow. Are you going to the mill early? Yes. She colored in the cat. Is she nice? He set the pepper grinder down with more care than it required. You do not have to tell me, she said. She finished the cat and started on the fence. He watched her for a long time and did not know what to do with the part of himself that had just been seen by his daughter. The next morning, Tess sent him a message through the Foundation's commission portal. 3 sentences. A family in the Glebe had inherited a piece she believed was original Upper Canada period. She wanted to discuss attribution and stabilization. Could he come to the office at 2? He came at 2. Her office was on the 14th floor and the windows faced the river, and the light off the water was gray and even. She closed the door behind him. She did not go to the desk. She took one of the 2 chairs by the window and gestured to the other. I am not the conservator for that commission, he said. I know. Then why am I here? She did not answer immediately. She set a folder on the small table between them and did not open it. This is not a request for attribution work, Soren. This is me asking whether you want to come back. He sat down because she had asked him to. I am not coming back. Why? He looked at the river. A water taxi was crossing toward the market. He had not said any of this to anyone except Bastien, and Bastien had not asked questions in 11 months. At the end, he said, José was in a room I had painted the color of birch forest because she said she wanted to feel like she was already outside. I did not draw a single line in those 14 months. After she died, I went into the studio and looked at the table, and I knew that if I drew the next line, I would hate it. So I have not drawn one in 4 years. If I draw one now, I will find out whether I hate it, and I am not ready to find that out. Tess sat very still. Thank you for telling me, she said. She did not lean forward. She did not try to change his mind. She put her hands flat on her knees and looked at him with a steadiness that did not ask anything back from him. A knock at the door. Vincent opened it before she could answer. Sorry, he said. Mr. Hartwell, your daughter's school called. Your phone is off. Behind him in the reception area, Margot was standing very small beside a woman in a school lanyard, holding a folded note in both hands with her backpack still on. Soren stood. Tess walked out before him. She crossed the reception and crouched down so she was at Margot's level and held out her hand. I am Tess, she said. Your father has been looking after things that belong to my family for longer than you have been alive." Margot took her hand. "I am Margot. I know." The woman with the lanyard said something about an after-school pickup and a schedule change. Soren heard it and did not hear it. He stood in the doorway of the office and watched his daughter take a stranger's hand without looking back at him first. The ice storm moved in from Lake Ontario on a Thursday afternoon. Environment Canada upgraded the warning by 4 o'clock. By 6, the roads in the lower town were glazing, and the Heritage Foundation had 14 pieces in transit from a Westboro estate sale that had not yet cleared the Queensway. Bastien put out a call. Soren stayed. He sent Margot to the neighbors. He worked through the early evening with the 2 other hands they could reach, pulling tarps, securing crates, moving the most fragile pieces to the interior wall away from the glass. By 7:30, the freezing rain had started. By 8, it was coming sideways. At 8:15, headlights swept across the mill yard and stopped beside the workshop entrance. Tess got out in a canvas work coat and rubber-soled boots, a torch clipped to her collar. She did not announce herself. She went straight to the far crate stack and began checking the stenciled inventory numbers against the manifest. Bastien looked at Soren across the room. Soren said nothing and went back to work. For 2.5 hours she worked beside them. She knew the manifest. She knew which pieces needed humidity buffer wrap and which needed rigid packing. She had done this with her father in this same mill from the time she was 10, and her hands remembered the sequence before her mind caught up. She did not speak to Soren except to call out crate numbers and confirm placement. He did not speak to her except to answer. Once, across a stack of crated chairs, while the sleet hit the skylights and the lights in the annex flickered, they looked at each other through the cold air, and neither looked away for the count of 3. Then she called the next number, and they moved on. At 1 in the morning, the freezing rain eased. The storm had tracked south of the forecast cone. The mill was intact. The crew sat in the main workshop with coffee. Tess sat on a bench beside Soren. Her coat was still damp at the shoulders. Her breathing had only just settled from the work. Neither of them said the line from the fundraiser. Neither of them needed to. When she fell asleep against the stone wall of the mill, Bastien draped a wax canvas dropcloth over her without comment. Soren watched him do it. Bastien met his eyes once and went back to drying his hands. By morning the river was still, and the ice on the lock gates caught the light. That afternoon, the Ottawa Heritage Industry newsletter ran 4 paragraphs, carefully worded. It noted that the CEO of the Caldwell Group had been observed in working proximity to a contract conservator on multiple recent occasions, and that certain board members had expressed concern about the appearance of personal involvement during a sensitive trust evaluation period. It did not name Soren. It cited an anonymous source. Tess read it in the car returning to the office. She did not respond. She called Soren from her desk at 3. "Did you?" "I saw it. If you want to step back, I will not hold it against you. I will not ask you to explain." A long silence. "No, Tess," he said it again. "No." She closed her eyes. She held the phone against her ear and did not say anything for a long moment. "Thank you," she said. She ended the call. Across the city in his own office, Hargrove read the article on his monitor and allowed himself, for the first time in 2 years, a small, deliberate smile. 2 days later, Soren submitted a counter-proposal to the Belmont Heritage Commission. Instead of the originally contracted stabilization work, he proposed a full documented restoration of the blanket chest. The piece her father had carried out of a Cape Breton estate sale himself in 2001, the piece Soren had drawn stabilization plans for at 26, the piece that had been sitting in the mill annex under a cotton dust sheet for 11 years. Tess approved it without comment. Bastien walked him back to the annex and pulled back the sheet. The finish on the chest had silvered in the dark. The brass had gone dull. The dovetails were still perfect. Soren stood beside it for a long time with his hand on the corner post. Margot came down the following Saturday. She climbed onto the workbench beside the chest before Soren could lift her up. She sat there with her heels against the cabinet and looked at it. "Dad, yes. Did you really draw this?" "I drew the plans for this." "Who was it for?" "For Tess's family." Margot touched the corner post. She did not ask another question. Tess arrived in the afternoon. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, and she looked nothing like the woman in the photographs in the business section. She climbed up on the workbench beside Margot without asking and sat there looking at the chest. Below the bench, Soren worked on a drawer runner and could hear them. "You do not have a mum, do you?" Margot said after a while. Tess was quiet. "How do you know?" Because you do not ask me about mine. People who have mums always ask. Tess looked at the chest. My mum died when I was about your age. Margot's small voice. Do you miss her every day? But it is not sad anymore, she is just there. Margot nodded slowly, the way a child does when something confirms what she already half knew. Me too, she said. Below the bench, Soren sat back on his heels and rested his forearm across his knee and held very still. At the end of the afternoon, Tess walked Margot out to the truck and waited beside her until Soren came out. She did not say goodbye. She touched Margot's shoulder and walked to her car. That evening, Hargrove was in the parkade when Tess came down from the office. He was standing beside her car with his hands in his coat pockets. Vote with us, Tess. No, then there is something about your father I will bring forward. She pressed the fob. Hargrove, you do not have anything about my father I do not already know. He smiled, the smile of someone who has been holding a card for a very long time. That is because he kept something from you. I will not. He walked away across the parkade. His footsteps echoed off the concrete columns. Tess stood beside her car with her hand on the door and did not get in for a long time. Monday morning, Bastian asked Tess to come to the back office of the mill. He locked the door behind her. He opened the old fire safe in the corner and removed a brown envelope that had been there for 2 years. Your father gave me this 8 months before he died. He told me to give it to you when you were ready to look at it without looking away. I have waited long enough. She opened the envelope at the workbench. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a copy of a trust instrument dated 2013, executed before 2 witnesses. It assigned 7% of her father's personal Caldwell shares to a private holding trust with voting rights vested in a single named beneficiary until 2031. The beneficiary was Soren Hartwell. The second document was a letter in her father's handwriting. She read it standing at the bench. He had written that he knew the board would push toward a sale once he was gone. He had written that he had chosen Soren because Soren had once turned down a significant commission advance from him in order to redo a joint on the Belmont chest that only Soren would have known was wrong. He had written that he needed Tess to have someone beside her who would not trade the work for a number and that he could think of no one else who qualified. He had written that he had not told her while he was alive because he did not want her to inherit a direction. He wanted her to find her own way to the answer. He had written at the end, if you are reading this, Bastian believed you were ready. He has never been wrong about a person yet. She folded the letter. She did not cry. She put both documents back in the envelope and looked at Bastian. Hargrove knew about this. Hargrove was the secondary executor. He was supposed to notify the beneficiary. He never did. She nodded once and left the back office with the envelope under her arm. She drove out of the mill yard and across the Chaudière Bridge and through Gatineau until she reached the cemetery on the hill above the river where her father was buried. She parked. She walked the gravel path under the maples to his stone and sat down on the grass beside it. She did not say much out loud. You should have told me. The wind moved in the maples. A gray jay landed in the branches above the stone and was gone. She did not hear Soren until he was already sitting down on the other side of the stone. He did not look surprised to find her there. She did not look surprised to find him. You come here, she said. Once a month since the funeral. How long today? I just arrived. She nodded. They sat on either side of the stone and looked out over the river. After a while, Soren said, he did not tell you because he knew you would not have listened until you needed to. You knew him better than I did. I knew one side of him, you do not. You know 4 sides of him, I never will. She did not answer. The sun moved a fraction lower over the river. A car door closed somewhere far down the hill. Neither of them stood. When the light began to flatten, they rose at the same time. They walked back down the path together without speaking. They got into separate cars. She raised her hand from the wheel. As she pulled past him, he raised his. That night, Soren sat beside Margot's bed for a long time after she had fallen asleep. The room was dim. The window was open a crack and the street outside was quiet. He had not spoken to José in his head in a long time. It had not been possible for most of the second year and then for a while after that. Sitting there now, he found himself doing it without deciding to. He did not ask for permission. He said, I think I am going to start drawing again, and then, I think it is going to be all right. He sat there another half hour. Then he went to the kitchen and made tea and stayed up until the sky began to go gray at the edges. He was at the mill by 6. Bastian was already there. I will take the trust vote, Soren said. Bastian looked at him over his mug. for the 160 people connected to this foundation, because she should not have to stand alone, not for her, that too. Bastian nodded. He set the mug down. He held out his hand. Soren took it. By Tuesday, Tess had the trust voting paperwork executed. She and Soren sat at her boardroom table with a list of 9 shareholders, of whom 6 might be persuadable. They had 4 days until a special session. They worked through those 4 days in meetings. Tess brought the financial projections. Soren brought the design vision he had not allowed himself to articulate in 4 years. A heritage restoration practice with a reopened design division producing original documented work under the Caldwell name, 160 positions preserved. 14 new ones over 30 months. He spoke about furniture and buildings and river structures the way he had spoken about them at 26. He spoke without flinching. By Wednesday evening they had commitments from 4 of the 6, 2 were still uncertain. Wednesday night Margot was asleep on the office sofa under Tess's cardigan. Soren had brought her because school had a PA day and the neighbors were in Kingston visiting family. Tess had put the cardigan over her at some point without saying anything about it. At 10:30, Tess stood from the table to stretch. Soren stood at the same time. They ended up on the same side of the table in the low light with Margot sleeping 10 feet away. He reached over and moved a strand of hair from her face. He stopped with his hand still near her cheek. She did not step back. Neither of them moved for a long count. He could have closed the distance. She could have lifted her chin. Neither did. "Tess," he said quietly. "Not yet, I know." He stepped back. She stepped back. He sat down on the far side of the table. She sat down across from him. A minute passed without speaking. Then they went back to the 2 holdout names on the list. It was the closest either of them had come to choosing easy over right. They had chosen right. They both understood that without needing to say it. Late that night, after Soren had carried Margot out, and Tess had locked the office behind them, she sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Her family solicitor had been working through the older estate correspondence. He had forwarded one email that morning. It was from Hargrove to the estate's outside counsel dated 5 months after her father's death. It read, "Do not notify beneficiary of trust instrument until I confirm. Confirmation may not come." She read it 3 times. She forwarded it to her own solicitor with one line, "File Thursday morning before the session." She closed the laptop. Thursday morning, the Caldwell Group's boardroom, 9th floor. 9 shareholders seated, board members along the wall. Hargrove chaired. He opened with the acquisition presentation, $86 million for 60% of the foundation's assets and full rights to the Heritage Archive. The terms were generous on paper. He included a slide near the end that referenced the newsletter item without naming it, the implication being that the CEO's judgment had been clouded by personal involvement. He paused on that slide a beat longer than he needed to. Tess stood. She was not theatrical about it. She walked to the front and placed 3 documents on the presentation table. She read the trust instrument aloud. She read her father's letter aloud. Her voice did not break. Then she placed the 3rd document on the projector. It was Hargrove's email to outside counsel 6 years old instructing them to suppress notification of a named beneficiary. The room went still. An older shareholder named Whitfield, gray hair, family friend since before Tess was born, leaned forward. "Hargrove," he said, "tell me this is not what it looks like." Hargrove did not say anything. Whitfield looked at the table. He sat back. Soren stood from his seat at the far end of the room. He did not raise his voice. He did not begin with anger. He laid out the plan he had built with Tess over the previous 4 days, the Heritage Foundation preserved, the design division reopened under the Caldwell name, 160 positions intact, 14 new ones over 30 months, projected output from the documented work line within 4 years. He spoke for 8 minutes. He spoke about restoration the way a man speaks about something he has been quiet about for too long. He finished by saying, "Her father trusted me not to sell this work for a number. I am not going to sell it. Miss Caldwell should not have to stand alone any longer. That is all I have." He sat down. The vote was called by shares, Tess's 33%, Soren's 7% trust, Whitfield's 11%. 3 more shareholders voted with them. The total against the acquisitions came to 61%. The motion failed. Whitfield, as senior shareholder, made the second motion, that Hargrove Aldis be removed as chair immediately pending civil action by the Caldwell estate for breach of fiduciary duty. The vote was unanimous, excluding Hargrove. Hargrove gathered his papers. He did not look at anyone. He walked out of the room and down the hall to the elevator bank. A journalist from the Citizen was calling his cell. He let it ring. The elevator doors opened and he stepped in. He had spent 25 years building leverage in this city, and for the first time in his adult life, he could think of nothing at all to say back. In the boardroom, Tess and Soren did not look at each other right away. Tess thanked the shareholders. Whitfield came over and put his hand on her arm and said, "Your father would have been proud of how you handled that," she said. "Thank you. He always liked hearing it from you." When the room had emptied, they were left at the long table together. They sat for a moment in the quiet. Outside the window the river was full of autumn light. She said, "We should get out of this room." He stood. Yes. They walked out together. That evening they ate at Soren's house on Drummond Street. Tess brought a butter tart pie she had made that afternoon between calls with her solicitor. The pastry had gone a little dark at the edge. Margot ate 2 pieces without remarking on it. The kitchen smelled of butter and the cold that still came under the back door. Margot talked about school. The class was studying the Ottawa River watershed, and the teacher had told them about the fish that ran in the Rideau. Tess named 3 of them correctly, including the muskellunge that her father had taught her to spot from the dock when she was Margot's age. Margot looked at her with the careful wonder of someone revising a theory. After the dishes, Margot went to brush her teeth without being asked. Soren stood in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel and watched her go down the hall. "What?" Tess said. She used to need reminding. "How long since?" "Tonight is the first time." Tess did not say anything to that. She picked up the dish towel and started drying. After Margot was in bed, they went out to the back step. The yard was almost dark. The light from the neighbor's kitchen made a yellow square on the fence. They stood at the railing without speaking for a time. That night at the fundraiser, Soren said, "I did not plan to say what I said. I did not know I was going to say it until it was already out." Tess kept looking at the dark yard. "I had been saying it in my head for 7 months, he said. "Every time I saw you come down to the mill, I never said it once out loud. Why not? I did not think it was mine to say. It was always yours to say." He turned to look at her then. The step light was low. Her face was in the edge of the shadow. "What now?" he said. She did not answer right away. She let the question sit in the air between them, then she reached for his hand, not his fingers, his whole hand. He took hers. They did not squeeze, they just held. They did not kiss. They stood on the back step of his house on Drummond Street and held hands and watched the dark yard and did not need anything more than that for that night. After a while, Tess said, "I should head home." "All right, I will be back tomorrow." "All right." She went down the back steps. She did not look back at the door, but she raised her hand without turning. He stood at the screen door and watched her go around the side of the house to the street. He stood there until the sound of the car engine had gone past the end of the block and the street had gone quiet again. Inside, the kitchen light was still on. He turned it off. He stood in the dark for a moment with his hand on the switch. He could hear Margot breathing in the back room. He could hear the wind in the maple at the side of the house. He had not known 4 years ago that there was a version of his life on the other side of the one he was living. He had not let himself imagine one. Tonight, for the first time, he could see it clearly. He went to bed. 6 weeks later, the last Saturday of November. Merrickville in a cold snap, light northwest wind, sky the pale blue of old porcelain. Hargrove Aldous had resigned from the board 3 weeks earlier. The civil case had been filed. The acquisition bid had been formally withdrawn. Whitfield had been named interim chair. The design division of the Caldwell Heritage Foundation would reopen in January under Soren Hartwell, head of heritage design, 24 hours a week with a clause for school pickup, written into the contract. Margot had started in the Rideau Valley Junior Woodworking Program at the Rec Center in Smiths Falls. Tess had filled out the registration 2 weeks before without being asked. That morning, the Belmont chest was carried out of the annex. It was a small ceremony, no press, just the crew, Margot, Soren, Tess. Soren handed Margot the marking chalk. It was a practice her father had learned from a cabinet maker in New Brunswick decades before, and had passed to Soren 11 years ago. The restorer marked the underside of a completed piece with one word, in a place only the restorer would know about. Margot lay down on the dolly and scooted under the chest and wrote in small, careful letters on the underside of the bottom drawer. Margot was here. Soren looked at it when she came out. He did not erase it. He helped her up and she took his hand and they carried the chest together to its place in the Belmont room. The chest looked right against the wall. The dovetails were still perfect. Bastian had been right 11 years ago. It was the finest piece her father had ever signed off on. Tess stood beside it for a long time with her hand on the corner post. Margot found the window seat in the corner and climbed up and sat with her legs folded, looking out at the river. Dad, yes. Is Tess going to keep coming here? Soren was checking the drawer fit. He kept his eye on the runner. I was hoping she would, he said. Tess was standing at the far side of the room looking at the finish. She did not turn around. She smiled, the kind of smile a person makes when they have heard precisely what they were waiting for. I will, she said. Margot nodded once and went back to watching the river. The line from the night of the fundraiser, none of them needed to say it again. It had been answered already on a back step in Merrickville, and it had been answered again now in the quieter voice of a child who had heard everything she needed to hear. The light through the window was good, the chest was sound. Soren had his hands on a piece of work he had drawn at 26. A woman he had not allowed himself to want stood across the room. A daughter he had carried alone for 4 years was watching the river from the window seat. He had not 4 years ago believed a day like this was still possible for him. It was possible. It was this.